One of my biggest bets for this year in terms of investments in crypto is Scale, the elastic blockchain network. So Scale is an L2 solution to the congestion problem on the ETH mainnet. They don't really consider themselves to be L2. They say they complement Ethereum, the Ethereum mainnet, and they'll complement ETH 2.0, but effectively they're an L2, and they're an L2 in the form of a sidechain. So before I talk a bit more about Scale, let's just have a quick look at the various L2 solutions. So actually this diagram might be better. Yeah. So to scale Ethereum, we basically need to reduce the cost of transactions, so reducing the gas cost, increase transaction throughput, and hopefully reduce block time as well if possible. So ETH 2.0 will give us all of this in the form of a sharded chain. But until then, if we want to get more people onboarded onto the ecosystem, if we want to get the mass market onboarded onto Ethereum through the various projects that exist now, like DeFi, NFT, we need a solution that's going to work right now. And that's really what L2 is about. And it's called L2 because it means layer 2. So layer 1 is your base layer, the Ethereum mainnet blockchain, and the layer 2 sits above layer 1. So it needs layer 1 to function, even if most of the work it's doing is not involving layer 1. So this diagram shows the rough sort of landscape of the solutions that are available. So we've got the Ethereum 2.0, which is on-chain L1 scaling. This is the long-term solution. And in the medium term, these are the L2 solutions. So you've got state channels. This is like the Lightning Network in Bitcoin. And it's really useful, or Raiden in Ethereum. It's really useful, I think, primarily for money transfer, asset transfer. Custodial sidechains like Scale, which I'm going to talk about, and then non-custodial sidechains. So this is, if you've got Omis Go, and then you've got rollups, optimistic rollups, ZK rollups. ZK rollups are actually the most powerful because they effectively, because with optimistic rollups, you have to run dispute games. If you feel that the final data committed back to the mainnet is corrupted or fraudulent, then you then have to raise a dispute, and that's how it essentially guarantees security. Whereas with a ZK rollup, you wouldn't even have to do that because you would only be able to commit data back to the main chain that was cryptographically and logically correct. But of course, ZK rollups have downsides of computational complexity. And I think one of the big ones is the fact that you can't yet write Turing-complete Solidity smart contracts in it easily. Although Starkware are working on a language called Cairo, which the aim for that is to be able to implement your smart contracts in that so that you would be able to do generic computation with a ZK rollup style system. But anyway, there are projects out there like Matic. It's now called Polygon, but formerly was called Matic. And they aim to support all of the solutions that people would want to do for a layer 2. And there are more and more projects being built upon Matic today. I think they've got a list here. Yep, so I mean, I've used Avgotchi. There's also QuickSwap, which is a port of Uniswap to run on Matic. And they're both really great. The interesting thing I find about Matic is they have the Matic chain, the Matic POS chain, and all of the projects so far seem to be running on the same chain, which gives them composability, which is great. It was one of the things that you want. But of course, the problem I feel with that is that if you're all running on the same chain, then eventually that chain will also get congested. So I think Matic's longer term vision is for each project to have its own chain and then to have bridging functionality between the different chains. That's the only way an L2 makes sense. So hopefully we'll see that over time. But for now, pretty much everything is running on a single chain. And it's pretty easy to connect to. It's very easy to change or configure MetaMask to connect to this. And it works really well. And the gas cost is low to zero and transactions go through very quickly. But withdrawal and deposit from the chain takes time. Actually, withdrawing from Matic back to Ethereum takes in the order of hours. That's something I noticed. And I don't know if that's improvable, to be honest. And it kind of made me think that in the long run, all of the L2s are going to have this problem, which is once you're on the L2, performance is really great. And the user experience is really great. But to get onto the L2 or to get off the L2, which even if you have to do rarely, you will want to do sometimes, it's not going to be that good in terms of performance or the time required to do that. So L2s really, for me, are a stopgap solution. And even with projects building on Matic and optimistic rollup and Starkware SDK, if you have different projects building on different L2s, then they need to build bridges to talk to each other. And I can envision that even with those bridges, you're going to have this problem of a delay in transfer just for security reasons. So it'd be interesting to see how this pans out in the medium term. But it's definitely convinced me now that I've been through the user experience of this, that even though it's great, we really need a long-term solution being a sharded L1 chain, which is what Ethereum 2.0 is going to be. And I think that solution and solutions similar to it, like Elrond, like Near Protocol, I think these are the long-term solutions. I think Solana is pretty good. I think Flow is good, but I'm not convinced that you'll be able to get away with not doing a sharded chain in order to keep being scalable. I feel that sharding is going to be necessary based on what I've read and learned. So I think, the long-term Ethereum 2.0, Elrond, Near, these are the chains that have the right architectural solution that's going to work not just in terms of scalability, but in terms of the user experience. I mean, ultimately, you as a user, a dApp user, shouldn't have to care about or, let's say, be impacted by the fact that a project is running on an L2 or it's running on a different shard to the one you're in. It should just be seamless to you, just like using the Ethereum mainnet is today. And the composability should also be seamless. And we're not really going to get that in the medium term from all of these L2 solutions. But in any case, L2 is here to stay, and more projects are going to be releasing on L2 in the near future. I think one of the most exciting ones is Optimism, who say they're going to have something out for production use this month. And I know that Uniswap have done experiments with this, and I think Synthetics are also going to be using Optimism to as their L2 solution. So it's effectively an optimistic rollup solution. Now, if this takes off, I can't foresee it right now, but perhaps there'll be some elegant mechanism to allow for composability between the various L2s. But we'll see. It's a pretty exciting space to be in, nevertheless. So let's talk about Skale. So Skale is going for the sidechain approach. Effectively, in Skale, you rent a set of validators who are specific to Skale to have your own blockchain for your dApp. So every dApp would have its own blockchain. And if we go into the Skale white paper, I can just talk about that in a bit more detail. Skale operates in the way that there's a smart contract on the Ethereum mainnet through which you register yourself and you apply for a Skale sidechain. And you can apply in 3 different sizes. So I think you have small, medium, and large. And small just means you're using 1/128th of the capacity of a virtualized subnode. Which brings me to the point, what is a virtualized subnode? So in Skale, all of the validators operate nodes at a high level as virtualized. And what that means is a given node isn't just going to be serving a single Skale chain. It could be serving multiple Skale chains, which is why when you're requesting the size of the chain that you want, you're effectively getting a fraction of the power that a given node has. And this is actually one of the security principles in Skale, which is that my node or my validator node could be validating across multiple different chains. And importantly, I don't get to choose which ones. The choice is allocated for by the Skale manager running on the Ethereum mainnet as a smart contract. So it's very hard for me to collude with other validators to take down the security of a particular Skale chain. So that's effectively how it works. And one of the other reasons they've gone for this is that this allows people who are creating elastic sidechains to submit payment for the duration of time that they wish to rent the network resources for. So if you think about it, you have a dApp and you want to rent a chain, you want to deploy your dApp on a Skale chain. This allows you to have some idea of how much it's going to cost you in total. So you rent this chain for maybe 2 months or a year, and it costs you this fixed amount, which gets paid up front. And that's it. There's no further cost for you to use that chain, and gas cost is near zero, if not zero, and you have fast transactions. So that's roughly how it works and why it's attractive from a user's point of view. The other thing that the Skale guys are really big on is the fact that it is a sidechain and not using some kind of rollup mechanism, although they do support BLS rollups within. And they say that ultimately a decentralized blockchain is the most secure solution. And using a virtualized subnode architecture allows them to give you what's as close as possible to a decentralized blockchain with a large number of nodes, despite only having a small number of actual nodes in it. So it's a very, very interesting model. It's a bit of an experiment, but so far logically it makes a lot of sense to me. Also, just to note that the cost of renting resources, I think it's going to be fixed at the start, but then it should dynamically adjust according to demand and supply in the market. I would expect it to be market driven eventually. So here's another look from the white paper at the virtualized subnode architecture. So you've got all of these hexagons, which are nodes, and then some of them are parts of large chains, which means that the entire node is used for that single scale chain. Whereas for some of them, a portion of them is being used for a medium chain, a tinier portion is for a small chain. So if there was a small chain, perhaps that small chain comprises of this. Oh, so another point is that each scale chain by default has a minimum of 16 nodes assigned to it. So there'll be 16 of these tiny ones to make up one small scale chain, 16 of these slightly larger blue ones to make one scale medium chain, and then 16 of these large chain nodes which are fully allocated to that chain. So that's effectively how it works. I think there is something in there about letting people request a larger number of nodes in future, but I guess they figured that 16 nodes is enough to ensure security. And security-wise, the nodes in these scale chains run using a Byzantine fault-tolerant algorithm, which basically means as long as 2/3 of the nodes, i.e. a majority, or 2/3 majority are honest, the chain can be trusted and there isn't any Byzantine activity going on. And as for the validator nodes themselves, as to why they would want to be honest, they have to stake Skale tokens into the Ethereum smart contract on the mainnet in order to become validators, and they get slashed if they, for example, lose connectivity for too long, if the chain goes down, or if they perform any malicious activity. So in that sense, it functions pretty similarly to most other proof-of-stake blockchains. Here's a sort of a close-up view of how a subnode of a validator node works. So you can see the virtualized subnode, and then every node has core software that manages its monitoring, allows the node owner to look at what elastic chains it's being attached to, although they can't control that, obviously, because that has to be randomly assigned for security purposes. So yeah, and all of this software is bundled as a Docker container, as I currently understand it. And further on, it talks on about, where is it? It talks about file storage as well. So in Skale, you can actually store not just typical, I guess, blockchain data, but also your files, and that will be stored redundantly and split across the validators assigned to your chain. I mean, to be honest, I'm not convinced at how useful this is. If I want to store large amounts of data, I'm more likely to use IPFS, which is global, and more importantly, would I want to store it on a chain which I'm only renting for a certain period of time? I don't fully understand the rationale behind this. I understand it's they want to offer to solve people's storage issues, but I don't understand why it would be a better sell than using some other kind of storage mechanism like IPFS. But anyway, we'll see. And apart from storage, they also talk about interchain messaging. So they'll have agents which will effectively allow one sidechain to message another sidechain, and it works in a sort of an inbox outbox sort of mechanism. So it's asynchronous effectively. I think this is really important because one of the things that we lose when we go to L2s is composability, or easy composability, let's say. On Ethereum, part of the reason DeFi has exploded so much is due to composability. I can go to Uniswap, trade my ETH for some DAI. I can go to DAI Compound, deposit the DAI, and having that collateral there, I can then borrow some, I don't know, BAT token, take the BAT token to some other yield farm somewhere and earn yield on it. So that composability just isn't possible if every project is building on its own L2, whether that's a roll-up style L2 or a separate sidechain or whatever. And so interchain or inter-L2, let's say, messaging is going to be really, really crucial to maintaining this composability and therefore this ability to build on top of other people's work. So Skale is actively trying to solve this. Again, I'm not personally convinced now that I've used Eth2Matic. I'm personally not convinced at how good this is going to be from a UX point of view. Not because I think Skale couldn't do a good job, just because I think there's just a limit to how good you can make that. It is annoying having to deposit and withdraw your assets to and from a smart contract just so you can trade it on another chain. It would be nice if I could just seamlessly transfer it over and it got there in the same time a intra-chain transfer got there, which is again why I think in the long run a sharded L1 makes the most sense. But anyhow, we need it. If we're going to do Skale, we need it here, and they've got a solution for that. And then, of course, it talks about governance for Skale token holders. So the long-term vision would be to have the Skale ecosystem, and particular the administration functions of the mainnet smart contract, be managed in a decentralized manner. This is pretty typical. We've seen projects like Aave and Synthetics do similar things with their ecosystems, and it makes total sense. And it also adds to the long-term intrinsic value of the Skale token beyond what it already does. So that was a very quick overview of how Skale works. And I think the next thing that's important for Skale is sort of the marketing side of things and partnerships. And one of the reasons I got into Skale was because they did their ICO, or their initial offering, on Consensus Activate platform. And it was the first project on the Activate platform. And because Consensus was behind that, it gave me a lot of confidence in Skale. So it's sort of an investor psychology for you there. You see the big names going in on something, it makes you think that that something must be pretty special. And I got into Skale there. It was KYC'd, and you couldn't put that much money, or there was a cap to the amount of money you could invest in the ICO. But I went and bought some on the market afterwards, and I topped up my holdings last month. So I've got quite a big bag of Skale now because I'm a big believer in the project. The other reason I topped up is because the price hasn't moved enormously from that initial price. If I remember correctly, I think it was around 12 cents in the ICO. I could be wrong. And then it went up to 20 cents, and I topped up around the 21, 23 cents mark. And now it's at 30 cents. But we'll look at price in a bit. So for now, I think what's needed is for Skale to hit production level. They announced this month that, they announced in February, that the code is at production quality level. They've got a number of dApps running on their testnet, so 13 dApp partner announcements. And now it's about moving those dApps and those projects to the Skale mainnet. And that's when things will really kick off. Because I think Skale is still a little bit under the radar in terms of the Ethereum ecosystem. So people are very well aware of Matic, aka Polygon. And that's already gaining a lot of traction, and more developers are piling in. But we haven't really seen that happen with Skale yet. And it's because they've been taking their time, and they've yet to really start marketing in a big way, in my opinion. But it's good to see that so far in 2021, they've been doing a lot of work in that direction. And by looking at their roadmap, we can see what else is coming down the line. I think the key ones are the interchain messaging agent, Scale Chain Deployment version 1, and I would say developer Scale Chain onboarding. So really, we're looking at July this year. That would be, by that time, things should really be moving into flow. People should be aware of Scale. It should have launched, and we should see more projects starting to build on top of Scale. And MetaMask are been actively working on making it easier to use different chains to the normal Ethereum chains, different L2 chains. And Scale is a part of that, which is also great to see. Of course, in the Telegram chat, they did mention that they'll probably have to do even more than this work, because ultimately every dApp is going to have its own Scale chain, which means the RPC endpoint for every dApp is going to be different. So there's probably going to have to be an easy way, perhaps a link on the page or something like that you click, which automatically configures your MetaMask to point to the right endpoint. I can definitely envision something like that needing to be, or maybe it's even automated. Maybe when you visit the dApp, MetaMask, through some predefined standard, MetaMask is able to detect what the endpoint for that dApp should be, and then prompt you as to whether you want to enable that endpoint and switch to it. I mean, that to me would be pretty cool. So the final thing I want to look at is the Scale token itself. So the distribution is pretty typical. So you've got a certain split for early investors, the foundation, for the validators and delegators, ecosystem fund, very typical split. And the early investors and founding team, they have a vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff, all the usual stuff, nothing to worry about there. Max total supply 7 billion, which is not wildly divergent from the Genesis supply. I also like the fact that they're using ERC777. It's a much better standard than ERC20, and I wish more projects would use it. And here we have the token unlock schedule. So this looks, very gradual. Interesting that, most of tokens will be out by year 4, and then from then it's just a very, very, very gradual increase. So all in all, this all looks really good to me. So finally, looking at the token price. So right now, the fully diluted valuation is 2.1 billion. Which is very, very similar to Matic. Having said that, my gamble is that Skale could potentially become more valuable than Matic, in terms of the FDV at least, just because they've yet to even really push on the marketing front, and they've yet to really launch these production level dApps. Basically, we've yet to see what a Skale dApp really looks and feels like, and how well it works, and how well the whole system works. Whereas for Matic, we've already got a few dApps that are out there, and people can already get some idea of how it is. And that's really my bet, that Skale is going to offer and come out with something pretty special. So I think on that basis, I feel even at this price, I bought in at 23 cents, and it's up, I guess, almost 30%. But I think even now there's a lot of room for Skale to grow. And if I had to put a rough ballpark on a valuation that would make sense in the long term, I would say for me at least 4 billion. Given where the market is today, at least 4 billion. So I would look to at least double what I've put in from now on Skale. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So like I said, Skale is one of my big bets for this year. I've got a big bag of Skale. I'm pretty excited to see what comes out over the next month. In the Telegram, they are talking about getting all the validators, the existing validators, ready for this sort of transition, or this big production level launch. And announcements should be coming out within the next couple of weeks about that. So I'm expecting a boost to the price just from that. And I think it's a good project with good fundamentals. And I recommend it as a buy at the moment.